Hi, welcome to the regular meeting of Brisbane Planning Commission, Thursday, April 23rd, 2015, 7:30 p.m., Brisbane City Hall, 50 Park Place, Brisbane. Thank you for coming. Call to order, please.
Commissioner Doe,
Present.
Commissioner Munir,
Here.
Commissioner Parker.
Here.
The record show Commissioner Reinhardt is absent.
Okay. So, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
A motion to adopt the agenda of Thursday, April 23rd, 2015 at 7:30 p.m.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. So before we make a motion to adopt the consent agenda, or a consent calendar, excuse me, is there anyone who wishes to remove an item from the consent calendar?
Nope.
No. So may I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar, please?
A motion to adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Oral communications. At this time, is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on any items not on the agenda? No? Okay. For written communications, I have I believe, an invitation from Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County for the Planning Commission. Anything else? No? And I think that is it.
I think we got a couple of more documents for one of the items
That is,
on the agenda today.
yes, that is for new business. So that's agenda item G, which is next up. So this is in connection with the consideration of recommendation to the City Council regarding short-term residential rental regulations. So we can talk about that when that arises. Staff?
Good evening.
Good evening.
By way of background, the City Council directed the Planning Commission to study the city's current regulations on short-term residential rentals and to make recommendations on what changes to these regulations may or may not be warranted. Consistent with this direction, the Planning Commission hosted 2 workshops in March and April. Additionally, staff released a community survey intended to bring this awareness to this issue and solicit some preliminary feedback from the public. The survey received 188 responses, and the final results are included in your packet tonight. At the April 9th workshop, the most recent workshop, the Commission reviewed short-term rental ordinances from other jurisdictions, from other communities, and heard additional public input. At the end of this meeting, the Commission made some summary observations and voiced several concerns with legalizing short-term rentals in residential districts. The Commission's general direction was not to support any changes to the current regulations to allow these rentals to operate in residential zones. The Commission instructed staff to schedule a formal consideration of this matter for recommendation to the City Council at tonight's meeting. The options available to the Commission tonight, if the Commission does not desire to permit short-term rentals in residential districts, the Commission would recommend that no amendments be made to the zoning ordinance. And staff would recommend that this be conveyed in a letter from the chair detailing the reasons supporting that recommendation. If the Commission wishes to consider changes to the ordinance to allow these rentals to operate, then the Commission should provide some direction to staff pertaining to the scope of such regulations. Staff would bring back a draft ordinance at a future public hearing for consideration in that case. That concludes my report. I'll answer any questions.
No.
Would the Commission like to ask any questions before we open it up? No.
Unless Commissioner Reinhardt any questions, he wasn't here in past 2.
No questions. I watched the video and read all the letters, so I'm up to date.
Okay.
Okay. With that, we'd like to open it to the public. Would anyone like to address the Commission? We have two. We have two folks who've signed up. Okay. Is it Prem Law? Prem. Sorry. Prem Law.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll try not to be a windbag, commissioners. So greetings and good evening. It's on the short-term rental issue. And one of the first things I'd like to say is that it seems to me that this is such a far-reaching, potentially far-reaching issue that it should be made a ballot measure first. And once that's voted upon, then it should be considered as to whether ordinances should be changed or not. I don't think that ordinances should be modified before you actually know what the percentage of people in Brisbane, at least the voters, is that support this. Now, with regard to the survey, although it may seem statistically significant to have 188 people responding, generally speaking, I think if you do a statistical analysis with Brisbane's population is about 4,200, right?
Yes.
Something like that. So with a 95% confidence level and a 5% margin of error, you would need a sample size of at least, I think, about 350 people. So first of all, that's one issue with the survey's results. Secondly, because it's on SurveyMonkey, there was no means by which anyone could determine whether anyone was submitting more than one survey against the rules, so to speak. So if someone wanted to submit a survey 10 times, that person would have the capacity to do so. And secondly, there was no way to determine whether the people submitting the surveys were actually residents or employees of Brisbane. For all you know, they could have been employees of Airbnb or Roomarama or what are the VB something, whatever, I can't remember the names. VRBO. Or they could be the lobbyists for these organizations, these companies. So there's no way to filter out those types of people from these surveys. And also, I thought, and I think a lot of people agreed with me, that many of the questions, especially questions 4 through 7 of 7 on the survey, were weighted in favor of the idea that the short-term rental concept had already been essentially approved, and this was just kind of I'm not, the term isn't coming to my mind, but you know what I'm saying, that it's just an afterthought, that's it. And so, for instance, question 4 was, how should short-term rentals be regulated? I think it should have been something like, should short-term rentals be approved and regulated or continue to be banned? And question 5 was, should the city limit the number of short-term rentals that are allowed to operate? Whereas it could have been, if the city were to allow short-term rentals, in what ways should it limit the number of short-term rentals allowed to operate in the city? And so on and so forth. So these were all essentially stated with a kind of the idea that these things had already been approved, when in fact they hadn't. So, and in spite of that, even given the biases of the survey and the fact that there was no control, even given those factors, more than 50% of the respondents decided that short-term rentals were not appropriate for Brisbane. So I would just like to state that on the record for this meeting. I'm sure that everybody knows it, but I'd like to state it anyway. And secondly, I'd also like to discuss some of the definitions that we have in our ordinances. For instance, Section 17.02.285, the definition of family, which I think is appropriate to discuss because these short-term rentals would be in residential districts, particularly Chapter 17.06, Chapter 17.08, and Chapter 17.10. R1 residential districts, R2 residential districts, R3 residential districts. And by the definition of family that is in the ordinances, it means one or more persons, related or unrelated, occupying a dwelling unit and living together as a single housekeeping unit. The term shall not include a group of persons occupying a fraternity or sorority house, club, hotel, motel, convalescent home, group care home, or institution of any kind. Likewise, dwelling is referred to a place that is used as the personal residence of the occupants thereof. And additionally, the definition goes on to say, but excludes trailers, campers, tents, recreational vehicles, hotels, motels, boarding houses, and temporary structures. So these are some things that I'd like to bring to light. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prem.
Mr. Peter McGurdy?
Good evening. I'm Peter McGurdy at 401 Alvarado Street. I'm just here tonight. I know that you are taking a vote to advise the City Council whether to allow or not allow short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. I believe that's what the vote will be tonight. And I'm here to ask you to please vote no. Do not change City Council, do not make a recommendation to the City Council to not change any of the laws to permit short-term rentals in our neighborhoods. We have a very wealthy, very strong neighbor to the north, San Francisco, who just put in regulations for this very issue 2 months ago, and they're already revisiting them because they're having too many problems with these companies and the people who are involved in these companies. So if a city that large is having these kind of problems, I think we should at least wait and see how this all falls out before we rush in and we have the same kind of problems that they do, yet they have more economic power to maybe resolve them, where we may not. We're a small town. I mean, we are a city, but we're a very small city.
Right.
So I'm asking you to vote no tonight. But if you do vote yes, I'm asking you to please regulate it as a conditional use permit under Chapter 17.40. And if you vote yes, require that the people get business licenses, these buildings be brought up to city, current city building codes. There are fire inspections to determine the occupancy rate, or street parking for the customer and the business owner, but please vote no. A density limited, a neighborhood notification under section 17.54, taxes paid by the business owners to the city, not the third party, but please vote no. And that these permits be only granted to permanent residents with a 8-week aggregate rentals for per year. But please vote no to permit these in residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to address the commission? Please step up.
Come on down.
Hello, I'm Aaron Clevin. I'm at 548 Alvarado Street. I'm in the yes camp. I think some good points have been made, but in the discussion on this issue, what concerns me is, it feels to me as if we're treating the baseline question, or the baseline of where this question begins, as the existing ordinance. Because there's an existing ordinance, XYZ has to be proved in order to change it. XYZ, we should have to vote A, B, C, or D in order to change it. I don't know that I consider the Brisbane City ordinances to be the baseline at which we establish the rights and privileges that we enjoy in this country. And considering that we're talking about an issue of personal property rights, we're talking about an issue of how one uses one's private property. The fact that at one time, before the advent of these types of services, the City of Brisbane and the City Council saw fit that the harm to having short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods outweighed people's right to use their property in that fashion. It was fine, but there's been a change in circumstance. And that change in circumstance has caused certain Brisbane residents to feel as if their rights are being unfairly infringed. That being the case, and individual freedom being so paramount as it is in our society, it seems to me the baseline in these changed circumstances goes back to that question. now that things have changed, does this ordinance infringe unfairly on the property rights of Brisbane residents? The fact that there's an existing ordinance is useful, instructive in some ways, but that is not the integrity of the ordinance is, to me, not the paramount concern. The integrity of the community and whether or not it's fairly treating its citizens is the correct concern. Now, I don't believe in unlimited property rights. I actually believe that there are all kinds of very sensible limitations that we have and that should stay in place. I don't believe this is one of them, and it's a new service and a new right that some of us want to enjoy. So that's my answer to the question of whether or not we should just step back and say, let's not touch the ordinance is in place. To me, that's not the key issue. The key issue is there's been a change that's alerted us to the fact that rights might be violated by the ordinance. I also want to speak to the question of the character of the neighborhood, because there's a few things on this issue where I just see it differently than the way I'm hearing it presented a lot of the time. There's a concern that I keep hearing echoed that somehow allowing Airbnb or short-term rental in any capacity in the neighborhood is going to change the character of the neighborhood. I see it exactly the opposite way. I think that with home prices going up the way they are, even in Brisbane, it's these options for supplemental income that keep homes within reach for ordinary people. I think this fear that I've heard some echo that Brisbane's going to become a place where you can only afford to buy a house if you're extremely rich or if you're a corporation trying to start a business. I think that day is almost here, if not here. And one of the things that mitigates that is the ability of people to make some supplemental income off of their properties. Everyone I've spoken to who is in favor of having some allowance of Airbnb or of short-term rental in the community would like to see limitations on it. I haven't spoken to anybody who has said, this is crazy, we got to erase this, just get this off the books, we should be able to do whatever we want unlimited with our properties. I haven't heard anyone say that. The kinds of limitations you were talking about, a lot of them sound sensible to me, sound like they're worth discussing. There's a discussion to be had about it. As to whether the city has the resources to regulate, I see that as a question either way. If there's an ordinance that says you can't have short-term rentals, then making sure that nobody's doing short-term rentals is regulating. So it really becomes a question not of can we regulate, but how much can we regulate? How complex can we afford for the ordinances to be? And I think everyone would like to see a simple ordinance that doesn't blow anybody's mind. That said, there's a lot more I could say about this. I've discussed it extensively in messages to the Commission and on public media, and I don't necessarily want to repeat all that now. But I wanted to point out that there's a framing issue here that I'm not convinced that even those who are opposed to this, I'm not convinced that their perspective on it is actually geared to achieve the goals they want to achieve. I think they may end up achieving exactly the opposite goals. A Brisbane where very shortly it's almost impossible for an ordinary person with a job and a family to buy a house. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, we have Barbara Ebel. Hi. Did I mispronounce your name? I'm sorry if I did. Okay. How do you say it?
I prefer Ebel, but
Ebel. Okay.
you know,
Barbara Ebel.
it's very subjective. My name's Barbara Abel. I live at 349 San Bruno Avenue. The majority of arguments against short-term rentals seem to fall into two categories. Specific technical problems with enforcement, revenue, parking, corporatization, or number 2, problems that arise from having those types of people. Ironically, we are all those types of people sometimes, as the law considers anyone who is staying at a hotel or a motel transient. So why do we have this fear of others? Sadly, it seems to be one of the less laudable characteristics of human nature. From the Romans' barbarians to the Hitler's Jews to New York's Irish. People seem to be determined to be xenophobic. As much as anyone may feel this way, I demand that we are better than ourselves. We owe it to our children and to ourselves so that I respectfully request that the Commission throw out all such statements that characterize strangers that might come into our community as trash. I believe the basis for the zoning law goes back to the 1930s Depression, when so many men were displaced and unable to find work for long periods of time. This gave rise to a proliferation of flop houses, which would certainly be as undesirable now as it was then, but I don't think we need it to come to that. As an environmentalist, I am generally for the layering of uses, creating a more complex social and economic web that allows diversity and flexibility of use. Allowing the population to be mobile within the current housing stock is surely more sustainable than building new hotels which sit partially empty a fair portion of the time. Clearly, I'm in favor of legaling short-term rentals in some form. However, I do hear and respect the community's concerns, and as much as they fall into category number 1. City revenues can be modestly supplemented by business permits and TOT funds. TOT is collected by providers without any burden to owners or businesses. Corporations and large-scale operations being kept out of the game by tying a permit to a homeowner's exemption, meaning only primary residences can be used as short-term rentals. Permits could be limited to 1 per homeowner's exemption so that multi-unit type B&Bs or hostels could not arise in residential districts. Brisbane could limit the number of permits it issues per year to ease growing pains and allow time for the refinement of regulation and enforcement, minimizing disruption to town character. Some sort of inspection or approval process that addresses property conditions, neighborhood character, and safety, perfectly acceptable. Track cumulative number of persons staying in this and figure out how to apply this to our RENA numbers. Because frankly, if the government is going to try and mess with Brisbane housing stock, I think we should mess right back. I fear a future is coming where our liberties will have to be curtailed on several fronts as water, land, affordable food, and housing all become increasingly scarce and social equality erodes. It is my belief that the government's role should fundamentally be that of protecting human rights, not curtailing them. That rights should be truncated only when they infringe upon another person's rights or health and safety. I do not feel that short-term renters are materially different than long-term renters, so that one does not cause significantly more problems in the community than the others. After all, so I made this little graphic here, and unfortunately I didn't have it together. So this is our meth addict, and this is our business guy, right? And for some reason, most of the people who are speaking strongly against short-term rentals think that this is who's going to come stay in our community. Okay? I know what Airbnb charges. It's probably going to be these people. And not even that we want to get into this state of discrimination, but it's just kind of crazy that, okay, sorry. So this is the potential range of human beings that might come to our community, all right? So this is what we're scared of.
Yes.
After all, this is America, where all people are created equal. You are innocent until proven guilty. The pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness are encouraged. Thank you very much. Oh, and I think my husband has some different ideas, but we all, nobody wants to throw the system in the trash, but I think we should seriously consider expanding liberties on whatever front we can. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Can we hear from your husband too?
Come on down.
My name is Greg Anderson, and I also live at 349 San Bruno Avenue. I actually share most of the opinions that my wife just espoused. I'm not afraid of people coming to Brisbane. I don't think that the occupants are going to be the trouble here. I strongly feel like the owner of the house has a certain dominion over it. They have the right to rent out a room to someone already in a non-short-term rental. So, you know, what's the difference? After the last meeting, I was wondering, you know, what gives someone the right to rent out a room to someone, you know, beyond just the inalienable right. You know, there's got to be laws here about zoning and so forth. And while the regular long-term rental laws provide no minimums, if you look at the hotelier's law, if you rent out your room for less than 7 days, then you're a hotel. And we've got existing laws governing hotels. And I admit that my perusal of the law was shallow, but through that shallow perusal, it's my opinion that the existing laws allow most of the homeowners to have the kinds of rental arrangements that they would need to do and that we would find desirable in this community. In the past meeting, people spoke about saying, oh, I can't rent for the whole year because my son is here for part of the year, or different situations. 1 week and longer rentals cover us almost all of that. If we break below the 1 week boundary, I think that we get into all sorts of questions about zoning and you know, the types of occupants notwithstanding. That's not something that I would like to get into. So that's my perspective on the situation. I think that we should stay pat, and the only action item I really think that I would like to hear from the Commission is if we could maybe get some advice from legal counsel to clarify what are the existing laws that a homeowner should already be following if they should choose to go to Airbnb. You know, there's no reason you couldn't go to Airbnb and say, I would like to rent my room for a month to someone off of Airbnb. And it doesn't matter how you get your clients, it's how you make your offering that's important. So clarify that. I think we're all good. No matter what you decide, enforcement is going to be a bugaboo, but there's nothing to do about that. But do our best and hope that people are mostly law-abiding.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Excuse me.
Hello, my name is Deb Horn. I live on Mariposa Street here in Brisbane. And I thought I'd start out with just making this a little more personal. And just, I've told my story a little bit, but I'm a resident here in Brisbane, and I love our small town and the village feel of our town. I love the safety. I love the mountain, and I don't want to see it carved out and become, you know, covered with any more condos than are there already. I'm on the board of Mountain Watch, and I'm working really hard to kind of move us to the next level so that we can get more resources and actually do a whole lot more work around ecosystem restoration. And I think that what they're finding nowadays is that if you have healthy trees and healthy grasslands and healthy soils, that it does more to replenish the atmosphere and mitigate climate change than anything else. So I just wanted to let you know where I'm coming from. I'm not a corporate person with horns, because I also occasionally rent out my house on Airbnb. Primarily, I do this to help reduce the cost of my son's college. This is, I think all working parents know who have kids in college, that a paycheck is just not enough, and we don't want our children to be saddled with this debt that grows and grows and follows them their whole life. And so this is kind of in the tradition of boarding houses, right, that we have had historically. In fact, we've had barter historically. So we've had people who, there's an illness in the family, or maybe a wage earner, one of the adults dies. And to stay in their home and to feed their children, they've rented out a room, and it's been called boarding houses. So it's kind of in that tradition of being able to use your home if you're in a situation where that will help your family or possibly help your community. So the other thing I want to personalize a little bit is, who are my guests? Who are the people that are coming? I get a lot of eco-tourists because I talk a lot about the mountain, and I get people to go for hikes on the mountain. Some of them have donated to the mountain, which is always a thing. I'm always putting a plug in. I get people who are really interested in our small, sweet town because that's how I talk about it. Yes, many of them are going to San Francisco, but also many of them frequent our restaurants and our cafe and our parks, and really appreciate it. And we've done a whole lot of work here, around, and conversation around downtown revitalization. And what our downtown needs is patrons. And if we're going to have some people who appreciate our town and patronize our restaurants, and I know because I throw away the garbage with all of the to-go packages, and so these are people that do come to Brisbane because they're interested in our town and supporting our town as well. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, I had a couple from Norway today who came with a 6-month-old baby. And the only thing I heard from that baby was, this family was wonderful. They went sightseeing, they hiked the mountain, they carry this baby with them. And they wrote a, thank you about how much they love Brisbane, how wonderful Brisbane is. So those are some of the people that I see in my home. Do I want a corporation to buy up the housing stock and turn our town into corporate hotels? No. Do I want any of the quality of life of my neighbors or my own quality of life to change because my neighbors are running some kind of corporate hotel? No. So I share the concerns of every person in this room because the people in this room, even the people that are renting out a room in their home or a little in-law downstairs, they love this town and they want to preserve the safety and the quality of life that we have here in Brisbane. So I've been to 2 workshops, and you saw the video, so you know. Well, there's been a whole lot of fear. There's definitely a lot of fear. And call it xenophobia. Just call it just generalized fear. So I have a really important question is, what are the facts? Airbnb short-term rentals have been here for a couple years. In fact, when I first came here and was looking for real estate, I stayed in one. So it's been going on here. So do we know, have we separated what are we afraid of from what the impact is? What's the data say? What's happening? What complaints? Do we know this information? This is really important information in making this decision about this issue. I think we need to approach this thoughtfully, not make any rash decisions here. As far as I'm concerned, the horses are out of the stable. It's happening. It's happening everywhere. In fact, last night I looked online to see what's going on with all of these platforms. I'm on Airbnb. It's the only one I've ever done. And I've noticed there's people that were on Airbnb that are gone. Why? It's being looked at. So I found 15 different platforms and companies that are supporting short-term rentals, including corporate housing, real estate. Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. And the shocking thing that I saw was I went to Craigslist and I saw over 1,700 properties with all the Airbnb type pictures on Craigslist. And people are hiding there because that's how they can do it without being so visible. I think in terms of the quality of people that I get on Airbnb who've been reviewed, who have their passports, their driver's license, credit cards, everything copied versus Craigslist. So the other question I I guess, that comes up with knowing that there's all of these different platforms and that this is going on and the horses are out of the stables. I feel like if you choose to outlaw it or ban it, the activity is going to go on. It's going to go underground. And so a question for you, if you're thinking about that, is how are you going to police that? How are you going to know that? If I have visitors come to my house from San Diego and my neighbor thinks, oh no, she's renting, what will happen? And also, you know, I'm coming back to the harms. What are the harms? We know in Brisbane there's a lot of people that run businesses out of their homes that may or may not be registered businesses. Like I know several people that are fixing cars in their garage. And I think about the harms of those chemicals and the harms of the exhaust and the, you know, it's like how much are we going to get into what's going on? Our neighbor's going to be turning neighbors in about what they think might be happening. How are we going to police it if we just think, we throw out the baby with the bathwater, it's going to go away? So I guess in closing, you know, I have to say that if you choose to regulate it, Brisbane can enjoy some nice tax revenue. Local businesses will have some more patrons. That's always a good thing. You can pass some regulations and legislation to help ensure the community is safe. A lot more than if you throw out the baby with the bathwater and it just goes on and you can't regulate it at all. So, so I'd like to propose that we give this a little more thought. I don't know that we should spend enough money for an ordinance because we really need to do some more education. People really need to get past the fears, understand the data, understand the impacts, understand possible harms, think realistically about de-risking it as much as possible. But if you have draconian regulations, right, it will still go underground. So it really needs to be very thoughtful. It's here. This is a big thing for you all to chew on and think about and consider, but I don't think it's going to go away. And I, for one, as a resident here, don't want it to be illegal. I'd prefer if it were regulated because I'm a community member myself. So anyway, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak in front of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Please step forward.
Madam Chairperson, City Planning Commission, excuse me, I have no voice. As Debbie just said, I kind of agree with everything she said.
You didn't state your name.
Karen Cunningham.
Your address?
I don't have to say my address. That's not part of the laws. All right, I'm just going to make a couple of comments here that I would like you to contemplate while we're moving forward with this. What is the difference between renting a room and Airbnb? I probably have half my neighbors on my street who rent rooms for certain periods of time during the year. I don't know whether it's for 3 weeks or 6 months or 3 months or whatever, but I've seen lots of different people on my street who are different renters in different places. So what's the difference? I don't know. I'm just asking questions. What do we say about our people in town who need the money? You know, we've had some situations over the last couple of years where, you know, a lot of people have been put out of work. We've got a lot of older people in town who don't have enough money to pay their property taxes and really need the extra income. So how are we policing how they do that? So if we allow them to rent a room for 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is, or we allow them to do Airbnb, I don't know what that looks like, but I think it's a good question we need to be asking. The scare tactics of those who talk about the term outsiders. oh, this is a pet peeve of mine. I hear the term outsiders all the time. What does an outsider look like in Brisbane? Is it you, Haji? Is it me? Who is it? What does an outsider look like? And we have this fear of outsiders. Is it you? I don't know who it is. What does an outsider look like? How are we determining who an outsider is in this town? It's driving me nuts that I keep seeing it and I keep hearing it. So we need to get over that and get on with the fact that we have people who live in our town, people who visit our town, and we don't call them outsiders. What do they look like anyway? I do believe that this should stay within in privatization, and we shouldn't have this become a corporate issue. Corporatization of Airbnb and all that kind of stuff in our town, I think, would be an absolute disaster. But having people rent rooms in their homes, how we regulate that, we probably need to have some regulations, but whatever. And yes, it may affect the RHNA numbers. Regional Housing Needs Assessment numbers, for those who don't know what that means. It may or it may not. I don't know what that looks like. I think we need to look at that, and I think that needs to come from our city council. And so, you know, what do you say if you just ban this altogether? For goodness sake, don't rent out your room to your brother when he comes to town for the next 2 weeks, because that's going to be against the law. And your cousin who comes from another country, don't let that outsider come and stay in your house for 3 months. So I see a lot of fear stuff going on here. And yes, San Francisco is probably completely out of control. But we're a small town. We are in a position to, you know, put some really good regulations in place to make sure that everybody is protected. And I don't know that you're going to tell your next door neighbor who's been renting their room because they can't pay their rent to kick those persons out. I don't think we're going to do that. So I think we need to be a little more compassionate in the way we look at this and look at it in a realistic fashion. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Thank you.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, who wants to start?
Why don't you go ahead?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. We heard the arguments from both sides, and both sides made some very good points. One of the first one that came to my mind was, again, the survey that was conducted and the validity of that in terms of, we really want to know what the desire of the citizens of Brisbane is. And this survey, I don't think, shows that. In my opinion, and I agree with one of the speakers in front of us, that we need to have a better handle on that as to what the people desire to do. And for that, I agree that we should have it on the ballot. Again, there is no bias to the people who really want to have the Airbnb or whatever you call it, or the Craigslist rental. I don't think we can label it as Airbnb. Even if we have the regulations, still people will advertise on Craigslist, and still they will rent the place. So I don't think it's specific to Airbnb. It's basically short-term rental. And we really don't have a good, clear definition between short-term rental versus the hotel rental, versus the regulations regarding those two things, as well as multifamily housing versus single-family housing. There were also questions raised regarding the property ownership and rights of that. If you look at that, there are a lot of things we do in this city as well as anywhere else that impinge upon our property rights. And the reason some of the regulations were because it was the desire of the community to impose that. For example, no housing in Brisbane Acres. That's clearly an example that violates the property rights of the people. And I don't see this thing as any exception to that. As far as are we ready for all this action here in this town? There are a lot of things we need to review, look at it before we can say that, yes, we're going to go ahead with this. Number one, very big one, is the traffic issue. Everybody knows in the town that the traffic and parking in this small town is really bad. Currently, we don't have that problem because it's underground. Not many people doing that. Once we make it as a formal thing, everybody can rent it. Then what's going to happen? There is possible that there will be surge of people. A lot of people will be interested in renting the place, and what will that lead to? We don't know that. And as far as the security of the people, yes, there are two sides to look at it. Some people look at it, the bad people will come in. Can we stop them? I don't know whether anybody is able to stop them in any of the town. Or are we scared of strange people coming in our town? Yes, we are. That's a human nature. One has to be ready for whatever consequences they will have in the town they're living. There are a lot of bad elements, and you can see every day there are problems with people being looted, or on the street, a lot of things happening in this day. And the reason for this is the way the economy is rolling right now. There are people who are doing very well. There are people who are not doing very well. As a result, there's both sides to that. And I cannot say that we should not look at the people who are, because they are scared, that's why they don't want it. This is a human nature, and I think we all should be scared. If we are not scared, then we are foolish. I don't think anybody will say that I'm going to keep my house open because I'm not scared of that. So it's not a good argument to say that there will not be bad people coming in the town. There will be occasion that people will be here, and we should be ready for that. Our fire departments are ready for the consequences as a result of that. We don't know yet. Our police department ready for this? We don't know yet. Our streets are ready for that? We don't know yet. Our parking situations, are we ready for that? We don't know that. And our majority of the citizens are interested in this? We don't know that. We did the survey. That was only a few people out of, like Mr. Prem Lal mentioned, it was less than 10%, or even not that much. Can we take the vote saying that that's the desire of because 10% of the people out of that, it was 49-51 split. Is that a good representation that people want this particular type of regulations here? I think sensibly one can say that that's not the good indicator that the people in the city want that. We need to have the better what the word I was trying to say. We need to have the better survey, or not even a better survey, but the ballot to see the desire of the people, what they really want. I'm not against the B&B. I'm not Airbnb. I'm not against the people who like to make some more money. We all like to make money. I mean, that's why we work from 8 to 5, sometimes 8 to 10. The reason is that we have to survive. And in this day and age, we know that the economy is such that we need more and more money to buy the houses and all that. But it's a scale, economy of a scale. So, and I don't know how long this search for the .com will stay here, and what will happen after 5 years. They all leave. Then what's going to happen? Because then we will be dependent on this extra income, and all of a sudden the income disappeared. So are we going to have the same situation as the people who got the loan, short-term loan for 5 years? At the end of the 5 years, the loan balloon payment was there, and people cannot make it. So I don't think we should look at only from the fact that it's going to give us a short-term income. I don't know how long this surge is going to last. Nobody can predict that, but we still have to look at the welfare of the citizens here and desire of the citizens. And I'm not against anybody's property rights. And I've, in fact, fought quite a bit for the Brisbane acres in the past. So I don't think that's a point here. If you look at the property rights, then we have to scrap a whole bunch of regulations in the town. Also, we have to recognize the fact that there are distinct difference between the single-family dwelling versus the multi-family dwellings versus the hotels versus the motels, and where this thing is going to fit is a question that we need to address. So we are not ready for this at this point, and the choices that we are given here is whether to accept that or not to accept that. So in the absence of all this data, my inclination will be not to accept at this point. Let's wait. Let's get the ballot run. Let's find out from the citizens what they want, and then thoughtfully consider all the other factors that were brought out by the number of citizens here, how to tailor this whole thing. We will have a little better idea, and we can, by that time, we will get some more feedback and more data from other cities that have done that. And I have nothing against Airbnb. I think it's a good program for bigger cities. I don't know, we are ready for that at this point. I'm not sure, and I don't think we should jump into this at this point. Also, that raises the question for me regarding the enforcement. I think this will be the question to the staff also, as a couple of the citizens have bluntly mentioned here that they are doing the Airbnb. One of them says that they're doing it in last 11 months. So I think this question should be raised to the city attorney as to what will be the ramification of that, because they're clearly violating this city ordinance. Are we going to enforce it, or are we going to forget about it? Because I do wanted to address this because it was addressed to us, and I need to. My job is to bring this up to the audience here. Also, I agree with some of the comments that were made by the ex-mayor, Ms. Johnson and Paul Johnson, regarding the Airbnb, and I think other commissioners got the copy of that also, and they made some very significant good points regarding this whole issue. So enough said at this point. This is my position, but I'll let the other commissioners speak.
Ready?
I'm not ready to move ahead on this at this point. I feel that, as someone said, I agree. I've been reading what's going on in San Francisco. They approved having something similar to Airbnb in San Francisco. Now they're changing. It's just too complicated to. They're going to go back and look at the ordinance. I think we should wait. I think we should wait and see how it's working out. I feel that this town is really not appropriately. It's got very skinny streets. People, they know where their parking places are, and if we bring in the idea that there is Airbnb, I think it's going to cause problems between neighbors. I feel that if we say that in order for an Airbnb to exist in the city, the person has to come down to the planning department. Then if any of the neighbors complain, they should come down. I can just see the neighbors being at each other's throat. And at this point, what's going on in the city is that this is a city where people walk out. They know their neighbors. They watch out for their neighbors. They know the kids. They know whose parking places, they sort of know who's where in these tight little streets. This is the fantastic thing about Brisbane. This is not similar in other cities. I mean, how many cities are like that? How many little towns are there? So, if we have a situation where there's people don't know if their neighbor is going to sell, and the person who's going to buy it is going to buy it so they can turn it into sort of a transient hotel, it's going to make change the situation in the city. If we're going to do this, I think it should go to the ballot. I think there should be a lot more discussion. I think it should be looked at somewhere down the road. I feel that the wonderful thing about Brisbane is that people really like each other and they like new people. So I don't think that this is, by saying that, this is a situation where we're saying there's this people and others. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether this town is ready to have an unknown number of boarding houses in the city. And how we're going to regulate it, how many are there going to be. And then there's only, some suggestions are that only homes that have secondary units should have Airbnb. Only some units that, condominiums can't have it because it's not on their ordinances. We shouldn't have it in apartment buildings. So it's going to actually end up being a certain type of residential unit. So right now, I think that we should just sit back for a while and think about it and re-look at it at another time, because I think that there's a lot of good questions that have been raised, but I don't think we should move forward at this point. Thank you.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Hello, thank you all for coming down here. I use Airbnb, I use Uber, so I don't know if I need to recuse myself, but no. But, personally, I love pushing up against the norm and redefining it. And, some have said, if you don't adapt, you die. Others said, if you take the liquor away, the desire to drink will go away with it. We saw how that turned out. But I'm not here as a commissioner. I'm not here to be, emotional and share what my thoughts are necessarily on that end. But I did want to admit that I do use some of these services, and they've been great for all kinds of reasons. But my responsibility is really to listen to you all, and I think we've been doing that in the last couple meetings, and I apologize for missing the last one, but I did listen to the video, read all of your letters, thoughtful letters, and my job is to make objective recommendations to the best of my ability, to support, under the law, and of course with support from the city staff's impeccable reports. Thank you. And I think supporting a layer of uses is like a great way of describing this issue. There's many layers of the law, as well as public opinion, that clearly kind of tell us this ordinance is kind of defunct. And someone else said, well, we don't want to, the baseline, we don't want to use kind of the ordinances defining that. And I think just acknowledging that it is defunct is when we can step away from that and then have a conversation. But I would like to clarify and ask the city staff a question, if I could, and for the community. Is it possible to request moving to a ballot measure as a recommendation to city council?
You can recommend whatever you like to the city council.
So that is an option. So I agree that a discussion, is still needed, and to join a camp to support or deny it right now, I think is premature. It is a new service in our society. Its results, impacts on communities vary. We've looked at what St. Helena and Santa Cruz and these different cities. They all have different makeups, and they all have different responses to this. We are not San Francisco by any means. It is kind of a good indicator on some level, but we have a lot of power and ability to, to enforce things locally and to kind of participate in a way that they can't, in a very personal way. So I think that's what makes Brisbane special. And because it's so new, I agree with Commissioner Parker's original request in the last meeting, to recommend putting it on the ballot, because I really would like more participation. More participation from the community and get them involved and educated about this, because if we are going to move forward and regulate it in some way, and, denying a change is a way of regulating it too, that they need to know what's going on so they can abide by these rules. And so I think it's a healthy way to structure this. There is a healthy way to do it, and, let's put it on the ballot. I think that's what I recommend. So thank you for your comments tonight.
Thank you.
So should we go ahead and change?
Actually, I would like to say something.
No, I was just going to make a point that should be in the staff report. There were only two options were given. Should we go ahead and put another option too, so that when we vote, we'll have three options?
I'm thinking that that's going to be a result of this conversation, no?
Yeah.
You're just making one way or the other.
Right.
No matter what you're recommending to the council, there's no third option. You're not in a position to put anything on the ballot. So it's all just a matter of what you choose to recommend to the council.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, so I think without rehashing everything that everyone so thoughtfully presented today, thank you again for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. I think I'm going to be echoing much of what my fellow commissioners are saying, but I'm going to take it from the ordinance perspective, right? Because I feel like that's the core of what we're talking about. So ordinances obviously are things that come from some sort of community decision. So at one time there was some relevance, some need for what we see here. Obviously, reevaluation is necessary as adaptation is necessary. And the times when this ordinance was originally created, it may have become outdated. And I think with the response from the community, granted, of course, that the survey, the remarks made about the survey are very, I would agree, to be not necessarily formal statistical samplings that we could necessarily rely on. But I think at that point, we have to remember when we were given this task, we were trying to get a pulse on what the community was thinking. And we basically had nothing. So the way it was crafted was more so, okay, we know that this is something that's going on. Would you like it? Would you not? And after you say yes or no, then if yes, and I think the presumption was always there, at least it was carried through. And so the hypotheticals were set up to give room for conversation. I don't think it was ever meant to, as a definitive answer to anything. So in terms of the survey and the data collection, in order to provide some sort of platform for an reevaluation of whether the ordinance actually applies currently to our changing times and to our current situation. And remembering that an ordinance is there and it should exist if it in fact is applicable. If it is not applicable or if it needs not modification, I think that's why we do what we do, right? We have bodies in place to kind of look at it. We ask the community, we have feedback, and we have that conversation. So based on that, I feel like the determining question would be, how do we at this point wisely deal with the changing times to best address the community needs, given that we do, in fact, more than likely than not, need the regulations? Because, as someone put it, the horse is out of the stable, it's happening. And then I also have questions that I think a further sessions or additional sessions would provide a better comparative basis for us to talk about landowner rights. What's the difference between a landlord renting, for a month versus somebody who's renting for X number of days. So we have all of these fine line kind of conversations that I feel that in this short amount of time and with that type of survey, we cannot really address. And for precisely the same reasons that a community member pointed out, that we don't really know the accuracy level of this, right, of the survey. So again, I think that goes back to the data collection, which is going to be paramount in helping us decide how to move forward. And in doing so, at this point, I don't think we have that data collected sufficiently to give us kind of a guideline to go one way or the other. So I also agree that my recommendation would be that we do not make a firm suggestion one way or the other. There's just too much out there that I feel is not addressed or could be addressed better. So I would recommend also that we need to take it to the ballot, to the citizens, the 4,200, not just the 188, which is less than a tenth of the population, to ask what it is that they really want and where it is that they really want us to go. And when we do so, I would hope that at that point, we can have a more fertile conversation about what we need for our community. So with that, that's going to be my recommendation, that we speak to, or we recommend to the city council that we put it on the ballot for a formalized type of approach and also data collection.
So my thought is you'll put this on a form of a letter that will go to the council.
Right.
Because I hear on the one hand, clearly a recommendation to the council that they put something on the ballot is one thing, but when you mention data collection, I'm not sure what context, what exactly you mean by that, if that's the sort of the collective will of the group.
I think at this point, the data collection, we shouldn't put it in. First, we should see what the ballot says, and then we can have the further hearings on that. At that point, we can look at more into data collection and how it's going to affect and all that. First, we should need the desire of the 4,200 citizens here.
That's correct.
Okay,
was
that's
my
very
thought as well.
That's what
Yes,
I think. That's
my
what the
thinking as well.
data collection was meant to be.
That was assuming that it actually moves forward in that.
But as far as the regulation nitty-gritty of that, we can discuss at that point. The citizens say they vote, they say, yes, we go ahead with the Airbnb. Then we can have more extensive hearings and we can really iron out, what should be done, how the regulation will be tailored. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So will you get that? I guess maybe prepare the letter, but do we have to take the vote on this, or this is all we're looking for?
I don't think you actually need to take a formal vote at this point. The letter will be endorsed by the commission sort of collectively. So I think as long as for the community, if it's clear to staff anyway what your consensus is and your direction you're going to be recommending to the city council, I think that's sufficient. Your letter will be part of a formal record to the council and people can see it in final form.
What do we want to, how do we want it framed to be put to the electorate? I mean, do we want to recommend that, or just that we want to ask people whether they want Airbnb?
I think in the ballot, when the time comes, at that point, we can have the precise language as to how we're going to ask that. Right. And at that point, maybe we can seek the advice from the audience and the citizens also, some of the concerned citizens, that what they like to see, so that way we can formulate better. But I think it's too early for that. Basically, right now, we should just mention that we need the better, feedback from the citizens. The survey didn't serve.
But there's also a second theme, which is that are we ready to move forward on this? And so the question I have is whether we should put it on the ballot immediately, or if we should just wait.
I think that's the decision
that
of
would
council,
be,
I think.
Right. I'm thinking that would be the decision of the city council. Our job is to review and to provide some sort of recommendation, correct?
Yeah, and they may disagree with our recommendation too. It's possible.
Right. And then we would have to wait for them to come back and tell us, this is something that we need you to craft, X, Y, or Z, correct?
Yeah, if they have a different direction they want you to pursue, that's their prerogative. In terms of crafting words for a ballot initiative, that would, I suspect, be the council's prerogative with legal, assistance to ensure they have something that's meaningful for their purpose.
No, I think we cannot. I think this is finished, though.
Well, but can we reopen it if we want to have a conversation? Please step forward.
Just something quick that I think, this is Pram Law once again, should be taken into consideration is whether long-term renters are being evicted so that properties can be put on Airbnb. Because from what I'm hearing, one of my friends got a 60-day notice of eviction just like 2 days ago. and this is happening quite frequently. So I think that's something that needs to be taken
It's
into
a series of
consideration.
these concerns that we are worried about, so that's why it's too early. There are good sides to it and bad sides to it, so we have to look at both.
We have another person.
Barbara Ebel again. I certainly hope that by tying a STR to a homeowner's exemption, that it would completely eliminate corporate and, corporate ownership of these properties and severely curtail tenants, long-term tenants being evicted in favor of Airbnb. I suppose there are circumstances it might not be 100% proof against it. But what I really wanted to say is putting this on the ballot, because if somebody puts something on the ballot, do you want Airbnb? I'm like, do I vote yes or do I vote no? Because I think even though in favor of Airbnb, want it heavily regulated. So if you just ask a blanket question, I don't know how to answer that.
I think that would be something that would be in the purview of the city council, I believe.
Okay.
And I think they will be talking to council about how to frame it and
Okay.
provide it in a way. No, that's true, right. We can't, that would be more too informal.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I don't think we will have the similar questions in survey, so.
Oh, okay.
Hi, this is Deb Horn again. So in the interim, I have a question in the interim because just prior to the holidays, I got a letter from Brisbane saying I'm in violation because I'm running a commercial Airbnb, and I was not at the time. I had just posted stuff, and I think I tried it once, but then I had a colleague who was staying at my house, and she was leaving because my son was coming for the holidays, and I had no plans. And so I called up and I said, I'm not doing this. What does this mean? And I was a little concerned that no one had talked to me and it was out of the blue. And then just to let you know, and then to ask also then what do we do moving forward, is that I got a letter saying this is under consideration. And so you're no longer in violation because this is under consideration. So what's going to happen now with people that are currently doing short-term rentals on all the various platforms?
That's why I asked the opinion of the council, because not only you, but there's another letter. She's doing that for last 11 months, which is a long time.
Right?
So I think that's where the staff will check with the city attorney as to what the next step will be.
Currently, the council direction was to stay any sort of enforcement action until this process played out. So when the council makes a determination, they take your recommendation and advisement, they make a determination, they will give staff direction at that point how to move forward with, either.
In the interim, right?
Depending, I mean, if they do something on a ballot and say that pushes out, would they want us to stay any further enforcement? That would be the council's decision at that point in time. So, that'll be tied in with whatever action the council takes on this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Aaron Clevin again. I wanted to say, first of all, that I actually share Prem's concern about existing long-term renters being evicted to make way for Airbnb. That of the concerns that have been brought up, speaking just for myself, it's the one that resonates the most deeply with me. I agree that that's something that should be thought about very deeply, and attempts should be made if we should go forward to cope with that. I have a sort of a question and a concern about the concept of putting this to a ballot. I agree with the impulse to try and get a more complete picture of how the people of Brisbane feel. I agree with it heartily, actually. But I'm wondering, does putting it to a ballot mean that that ballot will have the final word? And the reason I ask is because I'm the guy who keeps talking about personal rights. There are rights that can't be abrogated merely by the will of the majority. It's really when my rights infringe upon your rights that you get the right to tell me to stop, not merely when you dislike what I'm doing. And so I have some concern about a ballot measure that would simply put the power to snuff out this right in the hands of the community based purely on their opinions. Where I think the more telling issue, the issue where we really get into an area where it makes sense, the reason we have these regulations, that the reason that I think there wouldn't be a slippery slope where we'd have to change every regulation that infringes on any right, is because there are reasons those rights are being abrogated in the first place, and those reasons won't have changed because of this particular issue. But the reasons are not mere opinion. They're not merely the majority of people don't like that you do this. I have a neighbor who smokes. When they smoke in their backyard, the smoke comes into my room. Smoking has become very unpopular, and secondhand smoke is harmful. If a majority of the people of Brisbane don't like people smoking in their backyards, should we be able to stop people from doing that by a mere majority vote? My feeling is no. My feeling is there has to be more than just that opinion, and that's my fear about the ballot. To the extent that some kind of ballot measure could be used to gather more data, to gather as complete a picture as possible about what people are thinking, because I do think it matters. I don't think it's a non-issue what people think. I just don't think it's the determinative factor. I think the determinative factor is how would this activity impact the community negatively? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. We want to be thorough.
Sorry, just one more. Joel Diaz, 7 San Diego. So I missed the last meeting, so I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here. It seems to me that the ballot measure idea is a bit premature, and I think that the task of the commission is to come up with ideas and develop knowledge so that you can make recommendations to the council, because it's kind of just saying ballot measuring is sort of in a way punting and letting the council decide what to do. And we can't just handle every difficult decision with let's send it to let's vote on it, So for me personally, I think there's just a lot of questions that I don't have answers to, a lot of legal questions, and I think it'd be really beneficial for the general public to have the city attorney here or somebody to weigh in about renters' rights, about how a month-to-month rental agreement is different than short-term rental agreement, and if a month-to-month rental agreement could be assignable to somebody for 2 weeks and they could assign it to somebody else, and then how that relates to San Francisco and their rent control laws. And so I could probably go on with a whole myriad of questions, but it just seems to me that there are really a lot of unanswered questions. And so when this goes to the council, they're going to have the same unanswered questions. And so there's going to have to be somebody going a lot deeper on this and developing that knowledge to find out the answers to these questions and bring a little bit more certainty and clarity and clarification to a lot of these questions. So that's it. Thank you.
Actually, I was the person who originally wanted to put this on the ballot, but I think we should give more recommendation than just put it on the ballot. I feel this is premature, that I think that we should have a waiting period to see how some of the other cities are going to look at this and just not move ahead quite yet. I almost think that in some cities like San Francisco, where there's just now a studio apartment is renting for $3,000 a month, it's getting very, very difficult to actually have a renter stock, a place for people to rent. And though I do want it to go to the ballot, I don't want it to, I sort of want more time to look at the issues. So what I'd like to say is, and I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, that we step back, look at the situation, see how some of the other cities are handling it, and continue the discussion, and maybe put it on the ballot, not this December or this November, but put it on the ballot a year from now. And at this point, continue with the ordinance as it is, and just take a step back. And that's more what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the rest of it.
I think that waiting is wise, but if you think about it, if it comes onto November ballot, that's another 6 months. Nothing precludes us in the meanwhile to continue studying in whatever way we would like to study it. But then if we leave it for next year, you're talking a year and a half from now, and what happens to the people in the interim?
Right.
And that's our question. And we cannot keep postponing or delaying that somehow, we come to a decision. I'd like to respond to the comment about the abrogation of rights and also the punting to the city council. I don't believe that by doing what we're doing, I personally don't feel that the commission is punting. I feel that we've put a lot of thought into it. We know there are a lot of issues, and frankly, some of those issues are beyond what the commission's purview is. So for us to go and investigate in a way that really is not necessarily useful at this time may be premature, and it may be, in essence, a frivolous use of our time during this period. And precisely because it may be touching on abrogation of rights, i.e. landowner/homeowner rights, that is exactly something that the City Council should be looking at when they review our recommendation. And hopefully they will see in the letter that staff is going to help us craft that there's going to be very sound rationales as to why we are saying what we're saying. And it's not us deferring and not taking a stand. I think it's a stand that we put a lot of thought into, and we hope that would be a reflection of the wisdom of the community as we've incorporated your feedback into our thinking and our recommendation.
I think when we say that in the letter, one of the things we mentioned that because of the survey results were not conclusive, we recommend that it should be put on the ballot. Then we should also mention that there are a number of issues that are still, there is no real answer for that at this point, and a number of cities are still looking at it, and we should get the feedback. So if the council wants us to continue to look at it until the time when it's time for the ballot, then the commission is more than happy to hold some more hearings between now until the time. And
absolutely.
So we can craft the letter like that too, if you want.
I do think we should talk about some of the things that we brought up last time, that we feel that it's important that non-conforming structures should be required to be brought up to current health and safety standards, and which would be costly to residents.
Yeah, but that's part of the discussion.
That's already part of the
yes, that's
discussion.
That'll be part of the record, and some of these things are going to be sort of building code issues that is really, frankly, not going to be all that germane to a policy direction that you're providing or making to the council. Not, building code requirements will be building code requirements, whatever you want to recommend. So I wouldn't think that's a really useful sort of direction for the council.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we're recommending that it be put to the ballot, and can you say that again?
Well, all we're trying to really kind of what I'm hearing so far is that you have a recommendation that you would like this issue put to the ballot, short-term rentals or however it's structured as a question, or whether it's advisory or binding or what have you, that would be for the council to decide, but basically get the larger community feedback on that issue. And if the council in the interim, if say they go that route and there's some gap of time, if the council wants you to continue your sort of research on the issue, you would recommend certain issues be addressed. What you've talked about, things like the sort of the physical aspects of parking, the way you could regulate it to make sure it's incidental to existing residential areas, not, a business proposition, or, so the kind of things that have come up in the last two workshops, and I think like that laundry list that I think is attached to this staff report were issues that if you were going to pursue this, it seems to me you'd be concerned about how the regulations would respond to that list of issues you've identified to date. So, and whatever's added based on today's kind of testimony and discussion. So it's sort of a two phase, and if the council says, yes, that's a worthwhile effort of, bit of your time now, they might say, well, that's interesting, but it may not be a good use of anybody's time if we don't really have a sense whether we're going to approve these or the community is going to accept them or not. It does become a resource time issue, right? How much time anyone would spend on a set of regulations that may or may not ever kind of reach fruition or even be considered. So, that's the council's policy direction would give you some guidance in that regard.
Yeah, also in the future discussion, it might be, if we decide to go, if the council ask us to go forward with the further discussion on that, I would recommend that we, at one of the sessions, we should have the city attorney to really clarify the differences between various type of, multifamily, single family dwelling with the, in-law apartment housing and all of that, how this all fall into picture, and also what are the issues regarding the, your personal, like one of the person brought it up regarding property rights and how this will be addressed and what are the reasons for modifications for existing ordinance, and how does it affect the property rights and all of that. So those are the questions I think I'd like to hear from our attorney rather than we trying to resolve here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the council, again, some of these issues may, could come to a head at the council level. For example, this whole idea of property rights and, what the current regulation, because right now there's a set of regulations on the books. So they could easily ask the city attorney to offer an opinion about the implications of enforcing current regulations in the broader context of private property rights. Because that's really fundamentally the question. If nothing has ever changed here, you have a set of conflict in terms between the current regulations and the activities that are occurring and the city's legal ability to enforce them that are really separate from the issue of changing the regulations, right? So, some of these things could be resolved by the city council and on the advice of the city attorney, I suspect. But I think you're right. Your point's well taken in terms of this hierarchy and gradation of short-term and month-to-month and single-family, multifamily, et cetera. Yeah, and I think those are would be very useful.
And not only that, we don't want to create a rental laws like they have in San Francisco. We don't want to go that route to make it very difficult for anybody to rent and evict and all of that. Everybody should have the rights to do what is reasonable. And some of these rental cities have gone far beyond that, like San Francisco and Oakland and Berkeley. So we don't want that kind of regulations here, in my opinion. But we have to be very careful when we do that. So are we done with this?
I am okay.
Okay, the last item is...
Yeah, I just want to reiterate. I agree. I hear what's been said about the ballot being premature, but I think being, Brisbane for what it is, it's a way of accelerating the collection of the public's opinion. And because of the lack of participation in a lot of workshops where we bring down resources and legal counsel and they're not here, and we get a small sampling, I think a ballot measure is a very good way of informing and accelerating that process. And we need that information, and frankly, City Council does too. And it's up to their purview and how they're going to word it or even address it or accept that as a recommendation from us. But I think it's definitely a good thing to do. It doesn't invalidate any kind of law, so it's not, that's not an issue. So yeah, so thank you.
Okay, so
Items initiated by the staff.
I don't really, I guess one informational item for the commission is I understand there were 8 applications for the single planning commission vacancy you have. And so the council's process, they haven't set forth a process that I'm aware of how they're going to fill that vacancy, but just want you to be aware that that's
But there's
the
no projected
situation.
date yet, right, as to when they're going to
No,
make a decision?
they're going to fill.
Okay.
And then the one last item, and I think you've probably seen it, is that the notice of preparation for the environmental impact report for the Recology modernization project was released, and there'll be a public scoping meeting next Thursday evening to take.
I thought it was Friday.
No, it's not Friday.
It's
It's Thursday the 30th.
So is it going to come before the planning commission pretty soon?
Not soon. It'll be after the EIR is published and the final EIR. So, you're
And
a
that's
ways
the-
away from having any public hearings on the project.
And that will be here
It'll be, yes, in this room.
at 7 o'clock or
7 o'clock,
7:30?
7 to
7.
10 p.m.
Okay,
Okay.
very good.
Items initiated by the commission. Do we have any subcommittee updates?
Only update, Sustainability Committee, next meeting's on May 5th.
And I think the ex-commissioner Cunningham was on one of the subcommittee, right?
Green Building Ordinance.
So we had to substitute until, should we
Well,
wait
I'm
until?
still on that unless we want to have 2, but
No, that's okay then,
Yeah.
if you're taking care of it. I
yeah.
thought maybe
It's on
nobody's.
hold. It's on hold right now anyway until,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, no problem. Okay,
So,
I make a motion to adjourn. What's the next date on the
well, to May 14th.
May 14th?
So would you have a second?
2015.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your help.